So, the infamous Super Mario 3D All-Stars just released 3 days ago as I record this. And I really wanted to start working on this video ASAP, but Jeffrey Bozo's company sucks. And so here I am after finally getting my copy late. And now that I finally played some of it, I still feel really mixed about this release. Just a heads up, I haven't completed any of these games. Now that sounds like I should immediately turn my ass around and stop making this video until I finish about 42 or so hours worth of Mario, but my plan is to have about 35% of this video to be more of a first impressions on each of the games, while the other 65 will be about the ports themselves and even the social discourse surrounding this release. Alright, let's get into this, fuckers. Super Mario 64 is actually the only game in this whole release that I actually played beforehand. The only thing is that it was the DS remake, and I also didn't finish it. High school me did not really like Mario all that much. Yeah, 64 DS isn't bad per se, I just really don't think that it's the ideal way to jump into the game for the first time. 64 was meant to be played on a console with a controller. And to be frank, the fact that they didn't remaster DS for this compilation honestly disappoints me. Yeah, everybody's understandably upset about Galaxy 2, but where's my 64 DS love, bitch? Anyways, Mario 64 is a great game and everybody here knows it. We don't need to reiterate that point. It may not be the best at anything, at least in my eyes, but for a game that's 24 years old, it's aged a hell of a lot better than other titles that released at the same time. The fact that it's basically pioneered an entire genre that's still great to this day is just something incredibly respectable about this game. Its controls, while a bit finicky, are easy to grasp. And despite the N64's garbage controller, 64 is meant to be a playground to entice improvement. Somebody's initial playthrough will be absolutely nothing like their third or their fourth, and that's pretty good. The levels, or worlds, are reused over and over again. I'm pretty sure this was to save development time and money, and thankfully it pays off. It doesn't feel lazy. It's a pretty smart way to repurpose an already complete level. So much so that this practice would also be done in future sequels. The game's just fun. It's nice to wake up on a Saturday morning and play Super Mario 64. It's kind of wholesome. Yeah, the guy who's constantly talking about anime titties and cursing up a storm loves a wholesome weekend dedicated to playing Super Mario 64. However, I do have my own gripes because of course I do. First off, you can probably tell that the game not only runs at 720p, which is pretty much considered standard definition at this point, but it also runs at 30 frames per second. It feels like I'm playing a Virtual Console re-release for the Switch, and not a fully fledged port. Did we forget that this console can run The Witcher 3 and Doom? Because I feel like we did. Plus, it's fucking letterboxed. The bars on the top and bottom of the screen, those are always there, no matter what I do. Are you kidding me? This is what happens when you just drop the ROM into an N64 emulator. But guess what? At least I can stretch that shit to 16:9 and run it at 1080p 60 frames per second. To be fair, there's some problems with it, and there's still lines on the top and the bottom. But I'm sure if I gave a shit to Google why this is happening, I can fix it in a minute or so. But I decided to take the Nintendo approach and just give up and call it a day. What are you actually doing? As hard as Nintendo is against piracy and emulation, you sure do offer a shittier experience than the people who are, according to you, breaking the law when we really aren't. The problem isn't that Mario 64 is ruined by the technical aspects of the re-release. It is still a very fun game to play. It's just that this was Nintendo's chance to make a definitive Mario 64 release, having it natively run in widescreen at 1080p and running at a smooth 60 frames per second. And all of that with none of the hiccups that come along with emulation. But no, they took the laziest route with 64. Maybe because it's old, maybe because it's already been released on the Wii and the Wii U, but that's all the more reason to make this collection for the character's 35th anniversary stand out even more. I can't fucking— Sunshine is a bit of a mixed bag for me so far. I've always wanted to play it, and now that I have, it's really fucking good. So far, I think that this and Persona 4 feel like some of the most ideal summertime video games, at least for me. But where the mixed part comes in is that it feels like it took some of the not so great parts of 64 and just amplified them, like kicking me out of levels after getting a star. The special platforming levels without the FLUDD feels like a baby bird with no feathers trying to fly for the first time. It's pretty revolting. The game just feels like it relied on that water aesthetic that was so prevalent in the 2000s on a little too hard. It also feels like it went too far into the action-adventure variety. You see, because of the reliance on FLUDD and the straightforward nature of the game progression, rather than being able to do what stars you want whenever you want, just like in 64, Sunshine just ends up feeling like a completely different animal. It's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing, it's just a thing. And while I am enjoying this game, I just really wish that they had removed some of the parts that retract from this pretty alright experience. During development, that is. I don't wish that 3D All-Stars completely changed the game, that wouldn't be alright. But what they did change, slick transition, they didn't change that much. You see, Sunshine was a GameCube exclusive, meaning that it had a standard controller with all the buttons needed. So all that was really changed was the addition of widescreen at the resolution of 1080p, but of course it's still in 30 frames per second because why not at this point? Just why not? The only significant change that I noticed was that since the GameCube had analog triggers, it could recognize half presses and full presses. So, like in Mario 64, if you slightly move the analog stick, you'll begin to tiptoe instead of run. Well, the GameCube implemented this into their buttons, specifically the triggers. So for Sunshine, that meant that a light press of the right trigger meant that you would spray water while running, but a full press caused Mario to stop and spray in place instead. And so, the half press was mapped to the right bumper, while the full press is still the right trigger. Since the GameCube lacked a second bumper, this really isn't that big of a change. I feel like GameCube games specifically just don't really need that much work when it comes to modern console ports or remasters, but Nintendo didn't seem to think that that was the case, which is how we ended up with these bloom-infested messes that are the Zelda GameCube remakes. Still great games, but I definitely preferred their original GameCube look. So thankfully, Nintendo's laziness paid off this time around. Super Mario Galaxy, the only game in its collection that I was actually aware of when it released. But seeing as I was 7, I was too busy playing Spider-Man 3 and the B-movie. Hell yeah, terrible childhood, baby! Woo, 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 woo! But a couple of my family members did have it and they played it a shit ton. And so Galaxy was always this game that I wanted to play but never understood it. And I'm really glad that I ended up getting this collection. Of course for the other games, but definitely for Galaxy. This game is easy. Not baby's first game easy, but in contrast to other titles in 3D Mario, it ain't all that difficult. But where some games can become boring due to their lack of difficulty, Galaxy kind of uses it to turn this into a vibe, as the kids say. If you go to YouTube and type calming Nintendo music, I shit you not, 8 times out of 10, at least 5% of the stuff on there will be Galaxy music. It just reminds me of the Wii generation and everything that was going on at that time. It's a nice warm throwback to being back in elementary school, and that's all I'm gonna say for now. I kind of feel like putting this game on the back burner just to make a video on it. But the important part to us is, what did All-Stars do to Galaxy? Well, this game definitely got the most plastic surgery done on it. Most importantly, it's at widescreen 1080p at 60 frames per second. Let's go! I'm joking, mostly. While that stuff is great, the most important change was the controls. Obviously, the Wii used the Wiimote and Nunchuck, and Nintendo ended up using all of its capabilities to their advantage for the game. Most importantly, its IR pointer and motion controls. Thankfully, the Joy-Con and most third-party controllers have these functionalities, so the gyro has to substitute for the Wiimote and the sensor bar, which is fine, it's just a little disorienting picking up star bits. Oddly enough, it still kind of feels like emulation in a way. Everything works fine, it's just that it still feels like this was made for the Wii. The game's still great, but the controls will take some time getting used to. I honestly feel like the Switch release will become the definitive way to play this game. There's probably very little reasons to buy the original Galaxy for the Wii. Let's be honest, that console held it back. It was forced to run at 480p, and when emulating it in Dolphin at 1080p, it looks like a fucking movie. Alright, we've covered all of these games and their changes, so now, social discourse. Why does almost everybody have some kind of complaint about this if there's nothing explicitly bad? Well, there's a few obvious reasons for that. At this point, everybody should know that this collection is only available until March 31st, both physically and digitally. Why March 31st, you ask? Well, this is just a game theory, but it may be because that's the end of the fiscal year for Nintendo. What's that? Well, a fiscal year is a year as reckoned for taxing and accounting purposes. Pretty much, that's when a company's earnings for the previous year are capped off, and Nintendo's fiscal year ends on March 31st. So pretty much these games were less of a celebration and more of a way to make a quick buck, which is fine. This just doesn't feel like it's a balance of those two parts. Remember how I talked about the 3 games and then that's it? Well, that's because that's it. there's nothing else to this collection. There's a music player for the 3 game soundtracks, big whoop. All of these tracks are available on YouTube thanks to fan uploads. You know, since Nintendo doesn't want to use Spotify like the pussies they are. But there's nothing else. No interviews, concept art, posters, not even the original trailers for these games. I love seeing that shit. The footage you're seeing on screen was uploaded to YouTube by, guess what, a Nintendo fan, because the company themselves doesn't actually care about this stuff. And while I do think that everybody over at the Big N really does care about Mario, I just really don't think that they put their heart and soul into this re-release, and it kind of shows. And look, just because I say this stuff doesn't mean that I think that this is a bad release. Objectively, getting 3 games for $60 is a steal, but the gaming medium has been doing this forever. Hell, entertainment in general has been doing compilations and double features for as long as time. It's now 2020, so you'd expect a little care, some fanfare, and maybe even a little pizzazz, especially after some of the great compilations they'd released in the past. And especially for the video game mascot. Even your dead grandfather who fought back in Nam knows what a Mario is. You just kind of expect Nintendo to, what's that thing called? Oh yeah, give a shit. So I'm sorry if criticizing Japan's richest company upsets you, but that's just how I feel. You do realize that you can enjoy something and judge it at the same time, right? You're completely in your right as a consumer to question a product. And it's the company's right to not listen to you, especially when they're rich as fuck and you can get away with literally anything. Just because something doesn't bother you personally, that shouldn't invalidate somebody else's complaints. I don't think anybody is in favor of the limited run nature of this release, but I have seen countless people just defend this game to death, not because they're passionate about it, but because they're upset about other people criticizing it. There's this guy who made this whole video calling people on Twitter clowns for being understandably upset over the limited release.
We gotta talk about Twitter and the Twitter mob because, oh man, they did some stupid stuff. Nintendo is known to do limited releases. You know, whenever they had the 25th anniversary, they had a limited release. But, of course, leave it to the clown mob to all be completely upset. They are salty because there is going to be a limited time of 6 months.
This is a joke, right? This is a goof. Is fucking Zach Raff gonna punch a kid? Is this punked? Fucking Ashton gonna come out with some dumb prank again? I mean, come on. Sega has been doing a damn good job of re-releasing their games for years now. Yeah, it's just the Genesis with most of the same titles, and they've been released on every console on the planet at this point. But I don't think that anybody's going to be upset about 50 Genesis games at the launch price of $30 that is now as low as $20 new. So sorry again if I get upset if the richest company in Japan just slaps 3 games in a collection for $60 and then just calls it a day. Honestly, if you're a big fan of any of these games, if you have a Switch and are in the need of some Mario, or if you just want to replay these games with their new changes, including handheld mode, then you are probably going to buy this collection anyway. However, if you own these games already, aren't against emulation, or just don't agree with Nintendo's business strategies, then you are probably never going to buy this anyway. Surprise, surprise, a Nintendo game is a very easy, either like it or you don't kind of mentality situation. This video practically writes itself, man. If you hate the business practices, that's fine. If you just want to experience these games on Switch, that's fine. Just stop taking this so seriously. By George, these are just video games. That's gonna be it from me today. And don't for a second think that I missed that milestone that we just hit. So yes, as I promised on Instagram, as a celebration for hitting 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to re-review my first video, which is Rise of the Tomb Raider. So yeah, slap that subscribe button. It takes a second and it helps a ton, plus you'll be notified when that video comes out. If you want to support the channel, my coffee is the first link in the description. You can donate as little as $2. And that's it for me. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I'll catch you guys next time. Later, kids. Have a good night.